The ancient halls of the Galactic Assembly hummed with the collected voices of 1,000 species. Ambassador Zyra Telax, her crystalline form catching the light of 3 artificial suns, stood before the gathered representatives with growing frustration. After 2 centuries as the Assembly's chief diplomatic advisor, she had never faced such willful ignorance from her peers. "You fundamentally misunderstand the nature of humans," she projected, her harmonics carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. "They are not like the other species you've coerced into your conflicts. Their neutrality is not born of weakness or indecision." High Commander Vexthor of the Varaxian Empire rose from his seat, his scaled armor clinking as he moved. "With respect, Ambassador, your fascination with this primitive species has clouded your judgment. They've barely established colonies beyond their home system. Their technology is centuries behind ours. What possible threat could they pose?" Zyra's crystalline structure flickered with barely contained emotion. "That's precisely the kind of thinking that makes them dangerous, Commander. Humanity's greatest strength isn't their technology or their military might. It's their adaptability and their absolute refusal to accept defeat." The chamber erupted in dismissive chatter. In her private chambers, Zyra accessed the secure quantum communications network. She had done all she could to prevent this catastrophe through official channels. Now she had one last duty to perform. The human ambassador needed to be warned. The galaxy was about to learn a very costly lesson about why some species were better left neutral. The Varaxian assault fleet emerged from hyperspace on the edges of the Proxima Centauri colony, their massive warships casting long shadows across the star's dim red light. Admiral Kavul stood on his command bridge, mandibles clicking in anticipation. Intelligence suggested the human settlement below housed barely 50,000 colonists, protected by a handful of outdated defense platforms. "Begin the standard subjugation protocol," Kavul ordered. "Disable their communications first, then their defensive systems. I want this colony under our control within 6 standard hours." The first wave of Varaxian energy weapons lanced out toward the colony's communication arrays. To Kavul's satisfaction, the primitive human shields buckled almost immediately. His satisfaction turned to confusion, however, when the destroyed arrays simply disappeared. "Sir," his sensor officer called out, "I'm detecting unusual energy signatures. The targets we just destroyed, they're holograms." Before Kavul could process this information, hundreds of small objects detached from the colony's surface. His tactical officer's voice rose in alarm. "Multiple launches detected. But they're not missiles. They're too small, too slow." Kavul watched the objects with growing unease. They were barely larger than escape pods, moving with seemingly random trajectories. Defensive pattern delta. Whatever these are, they can't penetrate our shields. The small objects suddenly accelerated, each splitting into dozens of even smaller units. Kavul's eyes widened as his sensor officer screamed, "Sir, they're not weapons. They're manufacturing platforms. They're building something in space." Within minutes, the space around the Varaxian fleet was filled with thousands of tiny robots, each no bigger than a maintenance drone. They swarmed around the warships like insects, attaching themselves to hull plating and shield emitters. "Ridiculous," Kavul snarled. "These toys can't possibly." His words cut off as ship after ship reported shield failures. The tiny machines weren't attacking the shields. They were redirecting their power, creating channels of zero resistance that made the energy fields collapse under their own weight. From the colony below, a second wave launched. This time, the weapons were conventional, but they struck with devastating precision, targeting exactly where the swarm robots had created vulnerabilities. 3 Varaxian cruisers erupted in flames before Kavul could even give the order to retreat. "Impossible," he muttered. "Their technology was supposed to be primitive. These tactics, this isn't how warfare is conducted." His tactical officer's voice shook as he reported, "Sir, we're detecting similar launches from all across the surface. They're not coming from military bases. They're coming from civilian manufacturing centers." The humans had turned their entire colony into a weapon. Every factory, every fabrication plant, every industrial center was producing swarm robots in real time, adapting their designs based on the data from each successful or failed attack. Kival's communication officer suddenly cut through the chaos. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission." From the surface, a human appeared on the main screen, wearing what appeared to be civilian manufacturing overalls. "This is Colony Administrator Sarah Chen. I'll make this quick. You have 30 minutes to retreat beyond the Oort cloud. After that, our nanofabricators will begin producing autonomous units that can follow you into hyperspace. And trust me, you don't want to see what we can make when we really put our minds to it." Kival's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme stress. "You're bluffing. No species would commit such resources to a mere colony's defense." Sarah smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "That's where you're wrong. Every human colony is equipped with rapid fabrication systems. It's not military technology. It's our standard industrial base. We believe in self-sufficiency. And right now, every fabricator in this colony is online and sharing data about your ship's vulnerabilities." As if to emphasize her point, another Varaxian vessel succumbed to the swarm, its engines going dark as thousands of tiny robots reconstructed themselves into a containment grid around it. 29 minutes, Sarah added calmly. "Oh, and we've already transmitted the specs for these defense systems to every human settlement in connected space. Good luck finding a colony that isn't ready for you now." Kival gave the retreat order with seconds to spare. As his battered fleet limped away from the human colony, he received a priority transmission from High Command. Similar scenes had played out at every human settlement the Varaxians had targeted. Not a single attack had succeeded. In her chambers at the Galactic Assembly, Ambassador Zira received the first reports of the failed assault. Her crystalline form resonated with a frequency that her kind reserved for moments of grim vindication. The Varaxians had expected to find primitive defenses and conventional warfare. Instead, they had discovered why humans had remained neutral for so long, not because they couldn't fight, but because they fought in ways that changed the very nature of combat itself. And this, she knew, was only the beginning. The Varaxians hadn't just failed to subjugate humanity, they had given them a reason to innovate. High Commander Vexthor stormed through the halls of the Varaxian High Command, his ceremonial armor clattering with each furious step. The latest reports from the front had turned his worst fears into reality. Not only had the initial attacks on human colonies failed spectacularly, but the humans were now taking the initiative in ways that defied all military convention. "They're not even fighting us directly," he growled at the assembled War Council. "They're changing the very fabric of space around our fleet movements." The holographic display showed the extent of humanity's response. Instead of building warships or mounting conventional counterattacks, they had launched thousands of small, automated platforms throughout their sphere of influence. These devices weren't weapons. They were space-time manipulation arrays, creating a web of altered physics that made traditional Varaxian military doctrine useless. Science advisor Ixtel manipulated the display, highlighting the areas affected by human technology. They've created what they call probability corridors, regions of space where our faster-than-light calculations simply fail. Our ships either can't enter hyperspace at all, or emerge thousands of light-years off course. "But how?" demanded Vexthor. Their understanding of quantum mechanics was supposed to be rudimentary. "That's what makes them so dangerous," a new voice interjected. Ambassador Zyra Telak stood in the doorway, her crystalline form pulsing with diplomatic authorization codes. The Varaxian High Command had been forced to request her help in understanding their new enemy. "You still don't understand what you're dealing with," Zyra continued. "Humans don't develop technology linearly. They make massive leaps based on immediate needs. The moment you attack their colonies, every human research institution, corporation, and garage inventor began working on the problem. They didn't try to match your military might. They simply changed the rules of space travel itself. The display shifted to show another phenomenon that was wreaking havoc on Varaxian operations. Human ships, if they could even be called that, were appearing and disappearing across multiple sectors simultaneously. They weren't using conventional drives or even standard dimensions. They've weaponized their theoretical physics departments, Ixtel explained, mandibles twitching in professional admiration despite the situation. These vessels exist in a state of quantum superposition. We can't intercept them because they're technically not in any one place until they choose to interact with our reality. Vexthor slumped in his command chair. Surely the Centaurians must be as affected by these changes as we are. That's the most elegant part of their response, Zyra said. The humans released their quantum corridor calculations to the Centaurians for free. Called it an open-source defense protocol. Now both sides of your conflict can use these new space lanes, rendering traditional military control of territory meaningless. The implications were staggering. In less than 3 months, humanity had essentially neutralized the primary advantage of the Varaxian fleet, its ability to control and defend specific regions of space. When any ship could appear anywhere, or potentially everywhere, the entire concept of territorial warfare became obsolete. But the humans weren't done. Reports began flooding in from across Varaxian space. Their financial systems were experiencing quantum fluctuations. Their secure communications were being intercepted by devices that technically didn't exist until after the messages were already read. Their warships' power cores were being shut down by particles that seemed to travel backward through time. This isn't warfare, Vexthor whispered. This is chaos. No, Zyra corrected. This is humanity showing you why they remain neutral. They don't think in terms of fleet strength or territorial control. When threatened, they don't just advance their technology. They completely reimagine what technology can do. A junior officer burst into the chamber, his scales pale with urgency. High Commander, we're receiving transmissions from every human settlement simultaneously. They're offering peace talks. The message appeared on the main display, simple and direct. Now that we have your attention, let's discuss why forcing us into your war was a bad idea. We will meet you halfway, literally. Our representatives will be in every possible location you might choose for the negotiations, simultaneously. Quantum superposition is useful like that. We look forward to explaining exactly how much more we can change the rules if you decide to continue this conflict. Zyra's crystalline form resonated with something almost like amusement. I suggest you take their offer, Commander, because I promise you, what you've seen so far is just humanity working under pressure. You really don't want to see what they'll come up with if you give them time to get creative. The Galactic Assembly had never been so quiet. Representatives from hundreds of species sat in stunned silence as they watched the latest data streams from human space. In just 6 months, humanity's response to Varaxian aggression had completely transformed the political landscape of known space. Supreme Counselor Anxithal of the Rigelian Confederation rose to address the chamber. We must face reality. The galaxy as we knew it has changed forever. Humanity's open-source defense protocols have made traditional space warfare obsolete. Half our species are already adapting their technology to use these new principles. The evidence was undeniable. Across the galaxy, smaller species that had long lived under the shadow of military superpowers were implementing human innovations. The quantum corridor network was expanding exponentially, creating new trade routes that no military force could control or interrupt. A holographic projection appeared above the chamber floor, showing the spread of human-inspired technology. Traditional space lanes, once heavily fortified by various powers, were becoming irrelevant. When any ship could potentially exist in multiple locations simultaneously, the entire concept of border control had to be reconsidered. The humans call it democratizing space, Ambassador Zirat explained to the Assembly. They've turned their defensive innovations into a public resource. Any species with basic quantum computing capability can now implement these protocols. The Centaurian representative, a being of pure energy contained within an environmental field, pulsed with concern. But surely this level of technological sharing poses its own risks. The humans have essentially handed revolutionary technology to the entire galaxy. A quiet laugh echoed through the chamber. Dr. Elena Santos, the newly appointed human representative to the assembly, stood at her podium. Unlike most representatives who dressed in formal diplomatic attire, she wore the simple uniform of the Earth Science Council. "You misunderstand," Elena said, her voice carrying clear amusement. "What we've shared is already outdated by our standards. The moment we released those protocols, every research institution on Earth and our colonies began working on the next generation of innovations. We don't believe in hoarding knowledge. It slows down progress." The chamber erupted in murmurs. The idea of deliberately sharing breakthrough technology, only to immediately make it obsolete with new developments, was alien to most species. Yet it perfectly encapsulated why humanity had become such a disruptive force in galactic politics. "But what of stability?" demanded the Arcturian delegate, his crystalline form vibrating with agitation. "These changes are happening too fast. Some species cannot adapt quickly enough to this new paradigm." Elena's expression softened. "That's exactly why we've established the Galactic Scientific Exchange Program. Any species that wants to understand and implement these technologies will receive full support from human scientific advisors. We believe that true stability comes from equality of opportunity, not from military deterrence." The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just defended itself. It had fundamentally altered the balance of power throughout known space. Military supremacy was rapidly becoming irrelevant when any species could access technology that made traditional warfare impossible. Ambassador Zero watched as the assembly struggled to process these changes. She had warned them about humanity's potential, but even she hadn't anticipated the scale of their impact. They hadn't just won a conflict. They had made the entire concept of military conquest obsolete. "There's more," Elena continued, pulling up new data streams. "Our quantum communication network is now stable enough to offer real-time translation and cultural exchange protocols. We propose establishing an open forum where all species can share their scientific and cultural innovations without fear of military coercion." The assembly chamber filled with holographic displays showing the potential applications. Smaller species that had never been able to participate in galactic politics due to military or economic pressures could now join the conversation as equals. The very nature of interstellar relations was being rewritten. The Varaxian representative, notably more subdued than usual, raised a hand. "And what guarantee do we have that humanity won't use these innovations for their own expansion?" Elena smiled. "The best guarantee possible. Enlightened self-interest. Earth's prosperity depends on a stable, innovative galaxy where ideas flow freely. We've learned through our own history that domination breeds stagnation. Our goal isn't to rule, it's to learn. And we learn best when everyone has a voice." As the session concluded, Ambassador Zira approached Elena privately. "You've done more than defend yourself," she observed. "You've completely changed the rules of galactic civilization." "That's the thing about humans," Elena replied with a slight smile. "We never just solve the immediate problem. We look for ways to make sure it never happens again. The Varaxians thought they could force us into their war. Instead, we've made war itself obsolete." 1 year after the Varaxian incident, the gleaming spires of the New Earth Diplomatic Center hosted an unprecedented gathering. Representatives from over 1,000 species crowded the quantum-linked conference chambers, some physically present, others existing in quantum superposition across multiple locations simultaneously. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Technology developed for defense had become the galaxy's greatest tool for unity. High Commander Vexthor, now serving as the Varaxian ambassador for scientific cooperation, stood beside his former adversary, Dr. Elena Santos. Together they watched as holographic displays showed the transformation spreading across known space. The once rigid boundaries between species were dissolving, replaced by a complex web of cultural and technological exchange. "I still find it difficult to comprehend," Vex Thor admitted, his warrior's bearing softened by months of diplomatic service. "We thought we were forcing you into our war. Instead, you forced the galaxy into peace." "Not forced," Alina corrected gently. "We simply made peace more advantageous than conflict. When any species can access quantum corridor technology, traditional military conquest becomes pointless. When anyone can participate in the galactic exchange of ideas, hoarding knowledge becomes counterproductive." The main display showed the latest statistics. Over 300 formerly isolated species had joined the Galactic Scientific Exchange Program. Regions of space once deemed worthless were now thriving hubs of innovation, connected by humanity's quantum communication network. The old power structures based on military might and resource control were rapidly becoming obsolete. Ambassador Zyra Telax, her crystalline form now bearing the markings of the newly formed Galactic Innovation Council, approached the pair. "The latest reports are beyond even our most optimistic projections. The free exchange of scientific knowledge has accelerated technological development across all member species by an average of 300%. Because we're all building on each other's discoveries," Alina explained. "Humans have always known that innovation flourishes when knowledge is shared. We just needed to prove it on a galactic scale." The chamber's attention turned to a new arrival, a delegation from a pre-FTL civilization that had recently made first contact. Under the old system, they would have been deemed too primitive for meaningful interaction. Now they were eagerly welcomed into the exchange program, their unique perspectives valued for their potential to spark new innovations. "The Centaurians have submitted their final disarmament proposal," Zyra announced. With quantum corridor technology making traditional space warfare impossible, they see no point in maintaining their military fleet. The resources will be redirected to scientific research and exploration. Vex Thor's mandibles clicked in what had become his version of thoughtful amusement. "To think, we attacked humanity because we thought they were weak. We never understood. They didn't maintain neutrality out of fear. They maintained it because they had already moved beyond our concept of power." The chamber's quantum displays shifted to show the latest breakthrough, a collaborative project between human scientists and researchers from 30 other species. They had found a way to manipulate space-time that made energy scarcity a thing of the past. Already, plans were being made to share this technology with every civilization in known space. "This is what we've always wanted," Alina said, gesturing to the diverse gathering. "Not to rule, not to dominate, but to learn and grow together. Every species has something unique to contribute. We just had to create an environment where they could do so freely." A soft chime announced the start of the day's main event, the inaugural session of the Galactic Innovation Council. Unlike the old assembly, this body focused not on power politics, but on coordinating the sharing of knowledge and resources across all species. As Alina took her place at the podium, she couldn't help but smile at the journey that had brought them here. The Viraxians had tried to drag humanity into an age-old cycle of warfare and dominance. Instead, humanity had pulled the galaxy into a new era of cooperation and discovery. "Let the record show," she began, her voice carrying to every corner of known space through the quantum network, "that today marks not just the end of an old order, but the beginning of something far greater. We gather not as conquerors or conquered, not as advanced or primitive, but as fellow explorers in the greatest adventure any of us could imagine, the unlimited pursuit of knowledge and understanding." The chamber erupted in approval, the sound echoing across quantum corridors to every connected world. In the back of the room, Ambassador Zyra's crystalline form pulsed with satisfaction. She had warned the galaxy about humanity's potential, but even she hadn't foreseen this outcome. They hadn't just avoided a war, they had made something better in its place. And somewhere in the vast reaches of space, countless species looked up at their skies and saw not a battlefield to be conquered, but a frontier of endless possibility, open to all who wished to explore it.